Hi there, I'm Jen Hand of jenhand.com, and today we are talking about the 3 secrets that normal eaters know. And I completely get it that when you are in the throes of dieting and binging and restricting and overeating, you simply cannot imagine the day that you are going to eat like a normal person. And I really do get it because I was there once upon a time. I thought that same thing about how does a normal eater not struggle with their weight? How do they leave French fries in their plate? How do they not have the cake, not have the 4th piece of pizza? And how do they just not think about food all the time? And I realized over the years from my own journey and working with different women and different clients that there's a few secrets, as I like to call them, of normal eaters and how normal eaters are different than people who are stuck in the diet and binge cycle. So the first secret is that a normal eater knows that it all balances out. And this is a really, really hard one because when you are dieting and binging, or you have a weekend binge and then you're like, okay, Monday I'm starting over, like this is it, you aren't trusting that it all balances out. And by that, I don't mean that you can just binge and binge and binge and never see that weight on your body. But when you come to a place when you're more in tune with your hunger and fullness, when you eat a little bit more intuitively, when you're not in the cycle of dieting and binging, you trust that if you have a bad weekend, you have a bad meal, you have a bad day, that it's not going to send you down to 16 more pounds the next morning when you wake up. And a bad weekend won't kill you. You go to a wedding and you have 4 or 5 drinks and you have cake and you have the dessert bar and you have this rich meal, and you realize that maybe the next day you end up eating a little bit lighter, and maybe you have more salads and tea to flush out the toxins, and more vegetables and fruits and things like that the next day, because your body naturally wants that, because it wants to eat lighter, or maybe it doesn't. But regardless of the way that your body responds to what you're eating, is that there's an ebb and flow. So there's no counting calories. There's no, okay, for breakfast I'm going to have 300 calories. For lunch I'm going to have 400 calories, and for dinner I'm going to have 500 calories, and you're totaling up to X number of calories per day. There's none of that. It's, you realize that if you have a big breakfast, then you have maybe you don't eat lunch, maybe you have a light lunch and you have dinner. If you have a really, really, pasta heavy meal, that you end up going for a walk and eating a salad the next time you eat. So there's an innate knowing that the body will always balance itself out. And just because you have a bad weekend doesn't mean that you're going to wake up on Monday, 15 pounds heavier. So the second secret is that normal eaters know and trust that their body will guide them in their choices. And this is also very hard to imagine when you're in the throes of dieting and binging, because you feel a sense of needing to control everything and not knowing how to trust yourself and not knowing how to trust your body. But normal eaters, what they do is they really trust, and it's almost a letting go or surrendering, because when you're controlling your food and you're controlling what you're eating and you're rigid and not flexible, and it's very, very, like you're walking on a tightrope, there's really no sense of freedom, no sense of letting go or surrendering, and you're operating in a very, very strict box. But when you can let go and trust, that gives you that sense of freedom that you think controlling your food gives you. And a normal eater will trust that the body will tell them what it needs. The body will indicate hunger. The body will indicate fullness. So if you think about babies and toddlers, young people really, really know they stop when they're full. They are hungry when they're hungry, and they don't, overeat or undereat because their body is always telling them. So it's getting back to that, what we were born with, that innate sense of knowing that, I'm hungry and I'm satisfied and I'm full. And a normal eater really, in a normal eater's world, there's no shoulds and shouldn'ts. So there's no, I shouldn't eat pasta, I shouldn't eat carbs, I shouldn't eat desserts, I shouldn't eat, A, B, C, D. Because when everything is on the table, you don't get that sense of needing to diet. You don't get that sense of forbiddenness. You don't get that sense of, okay, I need to eat everything I'm not allowed to eat. So there's really this deep trust that the body will guide them to healthy choices. And when you think about, going from where you are now to where you need to go, it's like going from A to Z. You have to go through all the steps in between. So you don't go from dieting and binging all the way to trusting your body tomorrow. There's steps that you take. That you start with a meal. You start with, picking something a couple times a week that you're like, okay, I'm going to try and listen to my body and see what it says, see what the feedback is. And so when you're learning to trust, you don't necessarily build that muscle overnight, because it's a muscle. You got to practice, you got to work it, and you got to really commit to finding that trust. Because once you get to that trust, you learn from experience. Deep inside yourself that you don't need to control it anymore. You don't need to have these rigid food rules and rigid parameters of what you're going to eat Monday through Friday, and then a different set of rules for Saturday and Sunday, and everything shit hits the fan and you're eating everything in your pantry the weekend. So you really, really are taking baby steps of learning how to trust, meal by meal, bite by bite even, and that kind of takes you into the land of normal eaters. And the third thing is, and this is actually a really interesting one because it took me a really long time to learn. Normal eaters know that everyone, for the most part, emotionally eats. And when I first started on this journey, I thought I had to learn to deal with every emotion under the sun and never, ever eat emotionally. So whether I was happy or sad or frustrated, lonely, joyous, excited, whatever it was, I couldn't use food. But when you really think about what food is, food is a part of our celebratory moments in lives. Food is part of social gatherings, and it's almost a community. It brings us together. We share food. We share meals together. So a part of, and I guide my clients to learn this, because when you can realize that even normal eaters, every once in a while will be stressed, have a really long day at work, come home, have a glass of wine and a bowl of ice cream because they just want to, because they want to forget, because they want to just zone out. And that's okay. When it becomes a problem is when you're doing it every night, or when you have the wine and ice cream and then it turns into 4 glasses of wine and then the rest of the cake and the brownies and the cookies. And so it's really, really freeing to give yourself that permission to know that even people who don't struggle with food, who don't struggle with their weight, still every once in a while are emotionally eating, because food, it's almost impossible not to, because food is so tied up into our emotions, comfort foods. And even on a cold winter night, you want, that bowl of soup and some crackers and stirred in. Food is nourishment. Food is how we feed ourselves, and that's on all levels, not just physically, it's mentally and emotionally also. So that's really, really interesting and important to kind of start just introducing that concept to yourself, that, it doesn't mean that I have to never emotionally eat again. And it means that, every once in a while it's okay to come home and, have 15 pretzels and be like, oh man, I ate too many pretzels, and move on, and that's okay. So just to kind of recap, number 1, it all balances out. Number 2, trusting the body to guide them. And number 3, everyone emotionally eats. So there you have it, the 3 secrets of normal eaters. And I'd love to hear from you. What steps can you take in your own life and in your own journey to get to some of these, to feel these beliefs as your own, and to really bring them about into your life so that the changes can happen and can occur? And I'd love to hear from you. So share in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you soon.